On February 2nd, 2025, gunfire and explosions tore through the perimeter of Niamey's international airport. But this wasn't a surprise attack. It was a trap, and Niger's intelligence services had been watching the whole time. What unfolded in the pre-dawn darkness wasn't just another violent episode in the Sahel. It was a deliberate counterintelligence operation designed to expose and dismantle an external plot targeting over 1,000 tons of uranium sitting in controlled storage just meters from a runway. The attackers came with weaponized drones and coordinated ground tactics. They were sophisticated, they were prepared, and they walked directly into a scenario Nigerian forces had allowed to develop for days, capturing several operatives alive while neutralizing the assault with precision that surprised even regional analysts. The event was barely acknowledged publicly. No grand press releases, no diplomatic theatrics, just tight government silence and the unmistakable signal that something far deeper than a firefight had just occurred. Because what's sitting in that airport isn't just uranium, it's leverage. And in the emerging contest for control over Africa's most strategic resources, Niger just sent a message that the old playbook no longer applies. To understand why this matters, you have to zoom out beyond the immediate violence and examine the chess game unfolding across the Sahel and into the boardrooms of global nuclear suppliers, defense contractors, and the ministries of nations scrambling to secure energy independence in an increasingly unstable world. Uranium is not just another commodity. It's the fuel of nuclear reactors, the backbone of energy grids in Europe, Asia, and beyond. And Niger, despite years of exploitation under colonial frameworks and extractive contracts, has now decided that the terms of that relationship are going to change. The uranium in question came from a mine that was, until recently, controlled by French interests. For decades, Niger's mineral wealth flowed outward under arrangements that enriched foreign stakeholders, while leaving local populations in chronic poverty and insecurity. That dynamic began to collapse in July 2023, when a military coup ousted President Mohamed Bazoum and installed a junta led by General Abdurrahman Tiani. What followed wasn't just a change in leadership. It was a fundamental restructuring of Niger's foreign policy orientation, its security partnerships, and its approach to resource sovereignty. The new government moved quickly. French troops, long stationed in Niger under the banner of counterterrorism operations, were told to leave. The uranium mine was nationalized. Contracts were reviewed, and the stockpile, over 1,000 tons of processed yellowcake uranium ready for export, was seized and placed under state control at the international airport in Niamey, where it could be secured, monitored, and eventually sold under terms Niger itself would dictate. This wasn't theft. It was reclamation. But from the perspective of former stakeholders and their allied governments, it was an unacceptable disruption of established supply chains and geopolitical arrangements that had functioned smoothly for half a century. And disruptions of this scale do not go unanswered. Enter Russia. Reports began circulating in late 2024 and early 2025 that Niger's government was in advanced negotiations to sell significant portions of a uranium stockpile to Russian state entities. The exact details remain opaque, but the strategic logic is clear. Russia, facing prolonged sanctions and seeking to expand its influence across Africa, has both the financial capacity and the geopolitical motivation to acquire uranium from a willing seller outside Western control. For Niger, the arrangement offers not just revenue, but a powerful counterweight to pressure from France, the European Union, and the United States, all of whom have expressed concern over the junta's pivot away from traditional partnerships. But selling uranium to Russia is not a transaction. It's a realignment, and realignments draw responses. The assault on February 2nd was not random. It was targeted, planned, and executed by actors with access to advanced weaponry and tactical intelligence. The use of weaponized drones suggests external logistical support. The coordination of ground operatives suggests training and recent mission preparation. And the timing, just as Niger's government was reportedly finalizing terms for the uranium sale, suggests an operation designed to disrupt, delay, or send a very direct message about the consequences of defying entrenched interests. What those interests didn't account for was that Niger's intelligence services had already intercepted the plot. Days before the attack, signals were detected. Communications were monitored. The decision was made not to shut the operation down immediately, but to let it proceed under observation, allowing the attackers to reveal their networks, their handlers, and their objectives. This is classic counterintelligence tradecraft. It requires patience, discipline, and confidence in your defensive posture. And it worked. When the attackers moved, they were met not with chaos, but with calculated force. Nigerian troops, backed by enhanced coordination within the alliance of Sahel states, a newly formalized security bloc comprising Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, neutralized the assault and captured multiple operatives alive. Those captures are critical. Live operatives can be interrogated. They can provide evidence. They can expose command structures and external backers. The silence from Niamey in the days following the attack suggests those interrogations are ongoing, and that the information being extracted is sensitive enough to warrant total operational security. This is where the geopolitical stakes become clear. If the attackers were linked to Western intelligence services, private military contractors, or state-backed proxies seeking to sabotage Niger's uranium deal with Russia, then what happened on February 2nd wasn't just a security incident. It was an act of covert interference in the sovereign economic decisions of an African state. And Niger just called it out, not with rhetoric, but with results. The timing also coincides with a broader recalibration of security architecture in the Sahel. The Alliance of Sahel States, formalized in September 2023, represents a collective rejection of French military presence and a shared commitment to self-reliance in defense and resource management. All three member states, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, have experienced coups in recent years, expelled French forces, and opened channels with Russia for security assistance, training, and equipment. The alliance is not just symbolic, it's operational. And the success of the counterintelligence operation in Niamey suggests that coordination within the bloc is maturing rapidly. Russian involvement in this coordination is widely reported but carefully understated. Moscow has expanded its footprint across Francophone Africa through the activities of private military entities, security advisors, and resource agreements that bypass traditional Western gatekeepers. In Mali, Russian personnel have been observed operating alongside national forces in counterinsurgency campaigns. In Burkina Faso, similar patterns are emerging. And in Niger, the presence of Russian logistics personnel near the airport and other strategic sites has been noted by multiple sources, though official confirmation remains deliberately vague. This is hybrid influence at scale. Russia doesn't need to deploy divisions. It needs to provide just enough capability, training, intelligence sharing, air defense systems, logistical support to help aligned governments withstand external pressure and consolidate control over their own resources. In return, Moscow gains access to minerals, diplomatic leverage, and strategic depth in a region where Western influence is visibly receding. But this isn't just about Russia filling a vacuum. It's about African governments making calculated choices in a multipolar environment where dependence on a single bloc is no longer seen as viable or desirable. Niger's leadership is not ideologically aligned with Moscow in any deep sense. What they are aligned with is the principle that their uranium, their territory, and their security decisions should be theirs to control. If Russia offers better terms and fewer conditions than France or the United States, then the choice becomes straightforward. Yet that choice comes with risks. The February 2nd assault demonstrated that external actors are willing to use force, direct or proxied, to contest Niger's new direction. The sophistication of the attack, drones, coordinated ground elements, targeting of a specific high-value site, indicates planning by entities with significant resources. Whether those entities are state-backed intelligence services, private military contractors operating under plausible deniability, or non-state actors with external sponsorship remains an open question. But the intent was unmistakable. Disrupt the uranium transfer and destabilize the government's confidence in its security posture. Instead, the opposite occurred. The operation's failure and the capture of attackers alive has strengthened the Nigerian government's narrative that it is under siege from foreign interests unwilling to accept African sovereignty over African resources. Domestically, this plays well. Regionally, it reinforces the logic behind the alliance of Sahel states. And internationally, it positions Niger as a test case for whether post-colonial resource relationships can be fundamentally restructured without triggering sustained covert or overt intervention. The uranium itself remains the central prize. 1,000 tons of yellowcake is enough to fuel multiple nuclear reactors for years. In a global energy market increasingly constrained by sanctions, supply chain vulnerabilities, and competition for secure sources, that volume represents both strategic value and political leverage. Whoever controls that uranium controls a piece of the future energy landscape. And Niger, for the first time in its history, is asserting that control belongs in Niamey, not Paris, not Washington, and not in the boardrooms of multinational mining corporations. This is the essence of the new African assertiveness. It's not anti-Western by default. It's pro-sovereignty by design. And it's being expressed through tangible actions, nationalizations, security realignments, regional alliances that challenge decades of established practice. The old model, in which African nations provided resources and markets while external powers provided security and capital, is being openly questioned. Not just rhetorically, but operationally. What happens next could redefine the region. If Niger successfully sells its uranium to Russia and uses the revenue to invest in national infrastructure, security, and development, it will become a model for other resource-rich African states considering similar moves. Mali and Burkina Faso are already watching closely. So are governments in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Guinea, and elsewhere, where frustration with extractive foreign relationships is rising and where populations are demanding that their leaders deliver tangible benefits from the continent's vast mineral wealth. But success is not guaranteed. The February 2nd attack may have been neutralized, but it likely won't be the last attempt to disrupt Niger's trajectory. Covert operations can be repeated. Economic pressure can be escalated. Diplomatic isolation can be intensified. And internal fractures within the military junta or between Niger and its regional partners could create openings for external actors to exploit. The silence from Niamey in the immediate aftermath of the assault is telling. It suggests that the government is still processing intelligence, coordinating with allied security services, and deciding how much to reveal publicly. It also suggests a level of strategic maturity that was not widely anticipated. Letting an attack unfold under controlled conditions, capturing operatives alive, and maintaining operational security during interrogations is not the work of an inexperienced or reactive administration. It's the work of a government that understands the stakes and is prepared to play the long game. Russian logistical interest in the uranium is almost certainly real, but it's also being carefully managed to avoid providing easy propaganda wins for Western critics. Moscow has learned from its missteps in other African engagements. It knows that overt military presence or heavy-handed intervention can backfire, alienating local populations and providing justification for renewed Western involvement. Instead, the Russian approach appears to focus on enablement, providing the tools, training, and diplomatic cover for African governments to pursue their own agendas, with the understanding that success will naturally align interests over time. This is a fundamentally different strategy than the one employed by France or the United States, both of which have historically tied security assistance to political conditions, human rights benchmarks, and alignment with broader Western policy goals. For governments like Niger's, which view such conditions as infringements on sovereignty, the Russian model is more attractive, not because it's ideologically superior, but because it's transactional and doesn't come with lectures. The broader fight over who controls Africa's uranium is just beginning. Niger is the immediate flashpoint, but the issue extends across the continent. Namibia, Tanzania, and South Africa all have significant uranium deposits. So does the Central African Republic, where Russian influence has already expanded significantly in recent years. The global nuclear industry depends on stable, predictable access to uranium, and any sustained disruption to established supply chains will have cascading effects on energy security in Europe, Asia, And beyond, that's why the February 2nd incident matters beyond Niger. It's a signal that the era of unchallenged Western access to African resources is ending, and that the transition will be contested, violent at times, and deeply consequential for global power dynamics. The attackers failed in Niamey, but the forces they represent, whether state intelligence services, private contractors, or hybrid entities blurring the line between the two, are not going away. They will adapt, regroup, and try again, because the stakes are too high to simply accept defeat. That Niger's counterintelligence trap worked this time. The question is whether the government can sustain that level of vigilance, whether its regional allies can provide meaningful backup in future scenarios, and whether the international community, particularly those powers now excluded from direct influence, will tolerate a permanent shift in resource control without escalating their responses. The uranium is still sitting at the airport. It's still worth billions. And it's still the most contested commodity in the Sahel. What Niger has demonstrated is that African governments are no longer passive participants in the extraction of their own wealth. They're active players with intelligence capabilities, military force, and the willingness to take calculated risks to assert control over what they believe is rightfully theirs. This isn't just about uranium. It's about who gets to decide the future of an entire continent's relationship with the rest of the world. And that decision is no longer being made in European capitals or corporate boardrooms. It's being made in Niamey, Bamako, Ouagadougou, and other cities where governments are choosing alignment based on interest, not history. The silence from Niger's government in the days following the attack is not weakness. It's strategy. The captured operatives are being interrogated. Intelligence is being analyzed. Networks are being mapped. And when the time is right, the information will be used, not for performative outrage, but for concrete action. That might mean exposing foreign backers publicly. It might mean deepening security cooperation with Russia and other non-Western partners. Or it might mean negotiating from a position of newfound strength with those same Western powers who once took Niger's cooperation for granted. What's certain is that the old assumptions no longer hold. Niger has shown it can defend its interests. It can operate with sophistication, and it can make choices that prioritize its own sovereignty over inherited relationships. Whether that leads to long-term stability, economic growth, and genuine development, or whether it triggers a cycle of intervention, instability, and deeper fragmentation, remains an open question. But the trap has been sprung. The attackers are in custody, and the uranium is still in Niger's hands. That's not a small thing. That's a turning point. And the world is watching to see what comes next. Sonnet 4.5 Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please D.